Greetings, humans of the internet, and welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you, as usual, from my undisclosed location in Midwest USA with some more historical insights. And I figured that since we are now in Holy Week, it would be a good time to discuss the Easter traditions in the United States. Because, for one thing, it shows that America is indeed a melting pot, because different cultures brought over different customs. So, when you wake up this Sunday and break into all the Easter candy, the Cadbury cream eggs, jelly beans, and of course chocolate bunnies, or when you sit down to dye Easter eggs with your family, you will know why we do these things. So, let's hop to it. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I think the best place to begin would be one of these symbols most often equated with Easter, and that of course is the Easter egg. Now, while many cultures have long viewed the egg as a symbol of fertility and new life, early Christians repurposed the egg as a powerful symbol of Easter itself. Easter eggs represented the empty tomb of Jesus when he rose from the dead. In early churches, priests would bless eggs and distribute them to the congregation at the close of the Holy Saturday service. In fact, some denominations still observe this practice today with a Saturday evening Mass that includes scripture readings, the lighting of candles, and baptisms. And during this service, the egg was a central figure, or rather the symbolism was. The hard outer shell represented the sealed tomb where Jesus was laid after his crucifixion, and cracking the egg open symbolized Jesus breaking free from death in resurrection. And boiling the eggs was really a matter of necessity. As many of you know, Catholics during Lent are not allowed to eat meat on Fridays. However, this law was even stricter during the Middle Ages because eggs and dairy products were also off the table. So rather than eggs being thrown out, they were instead hard-boiled so they could be saved for the Easter holiday. And dyeing eggs is a practice that is very, very old. There is evidence of egg dyeing in ancient cultures in Africa, and the bearing of gold and silver painted eggs was common in an ancient Mesopotamian civilization. Dyeing eggs to celebrate Easter was started by early Christians in Mesopotamia, and the practice soon spread among the Eastern Orthodox and Catholic churches. Eggs were originally dyed red to symbolize the blood of Christ, which was shed to pay for sin. And the red color was made with madder roots or beetroots. Yellow would be made with onion peels. The outer layer of onion, that papery stuff. And early Christian missionaries put a meaning to the colors. Red was obviously the blood of Christ, yellow was the resurrection and new life, and blue was the love of God. One notable instance of Easter egg dyeing was done by English King Edward I in 1290. As part of his Easter celebrations, he purchased 450 eggs and had them covered in gold leaf, and then distributed them to members of his court. Around this time, another tradition began, which was the gifting of eggs from serfs, the people who worked the land in England, to their landlords. Eggs would also be given as an offering to the church on the Good Friday service. However, this practice mostly disappeared after the Reformation in the 1500s. However, it did continue into the 19th century in some parts of the world. And during the 16th century, another tradition would be created, and that is Easter egg hunting. And we have the Germans to thank for that tradition. One of the earliest known references to Easter egg hunts dates back to 16th century Germany, when Protestant reformer Martin Luther organized an Easter egg hunt for his congregation. The Easter eggs would be hidden by men and then found by women and children. This was done in memory of the resurrection, in which the tomb of Jesus was found by women. We also have Germans thank for another Easter symbol, the Easter bunny. The earliest known reference to an Easter rabbit, or Easter hare as it was originally known, or Osterhase if you're using the original German, goes back to the year 1682 in an essay by a man named Georg Frank van Frankenow called About Easter Eggs. Quite appropriate, and this is around the time we see Easter bunny and Easter eggs being intertwined. Osterhase would bring children colored eggs as gifts, but eventually she would hide them in the garden for the children to find them. This was if the children were good. I don't know what she would do if the children had been bad. And when German immigrants made their way to the United States during the 1700s and settled in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Dutch, I did an episode on them as well, they brought with them their traditions of Osterhase and Easter egg hunts, and people have been hopping to it ever since. However, it should be noted that rabbits have long been associated with Christianity, especially Mary, the mother of Jesus. The association first began in Greece, where the early church was very active. During the years of the early church, it was believed that rabbits and hares could reproduce totally asexually, that is, without the help of a partner, so as not to offend the parents of any children who may be listening to this podcast. Anyway, back to the history. And I might add that there was good reason to believe that rabbits could reproduce asexually, as hares can conceive a second litter while still pregnant with the first litter, which gave the impression that they could give birth without being impregnated first. And now that we have some of the symbols of Easter covered, I think it would be a good time to discuss some of the food traditions, especially candy. Chocolate eggs have been around since the early 19th century, and they first appeared in France and Germany. The British company Fry's made its first chocolate Easter egg in 1873. However, the origins of the chocolate bunny are a bit more obscure. They were initially created in Germany in the mid-19th century, and they gained mass appeal in 1890 when Pennsylvania drugstore owner named Robert L. Strohecker, again German name, Pennsylvania Dutch, it all connects, when he created a 5-foot-tall chocolate bunny as an Easter promotion in his drugstore. Another popular confection, which is also egg-shaped, of course, is the jelly bean, whose origins may even stretch back to pre-biblical times. The ancestor of the jelly bean is most likely a Middle Eastern candy called Turkish Delight, which is a soft jelly-like starch-thickened candy topped with powdered sugar. And if there are any C.S. Lewis fans out there like me, Turkish Delight was what Edmund asked the White Witch for in Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Betraying your entire family just for some candy. Don't do it, children. Don't do it. Anyway, back to the jelly beans. Now, the outer coating of the jelly bean has its origins in another candy called Jordan almonds, which were invented in 17th century France. And to make Jordan almonds, French candy makers would place almonds in a large copper basin that was hung by chains and drip sugar syrup over it and swing the basin close to a fire so the sugar would build up in layers and dry quickly. One layer of sugar was dried out, they'd put more syrup in and then swing it, and the process would go on until they built up enough layers of sugar. And this process was called panning. Today, however, a machine called an engrossing pan does much of the work. Historians believe that a candy maker named William Shraft in Boston may have been the first person to combine these two methods, the making of the jelly centers and the coating of them in sugar syrup, in 1861, and he urged customers to send them to Union soldiers fighting the Civil War. The jelly bean would become associated with Easter during the 1930s, and it was seen as a symbol of renewal of springtime and a symbol of rebirth. And it has been estimated by the National Confectioners Association that more than 16 billion jelly beans are made in the United States each year for Easter, which would be enough to fill a giant egg measuring 80 feet high and 60 feet wide. That's a lot of beans. And that now brings us to two of the most popular Easter candies, one of which is definitely the most popular Easter candy, and that, of course, is the Peep. The other being the Cadbury cream egg, but we'll get to those in later. Now, let's see what all the peeping is about Peeps. For the past decade, Peeps have been the top-selling non-chocolate Easter candy. The ever-popular sugar-coated marshmallow chicks are made today by the Just Born Candy Company of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. However, that was not always the case. When Peeps first broke out on the scene, or should I say pecked out on the scene, get it, peck, peep, chicken, never mind. They were not manufactured by the Just Born Company, but the Rhoda Candy Company of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. When times were tough, the founder, Roscoe E. Rhoda, or maybe it's Rhoda, I'm not sure, Rhoda, but anyway, the founder, Roscoe Rhoda, looked to Easter as a way to increase the company's profits. Rhoda appealed to the religious population of Lancaster by producing candy shaped like icons of Easter, including holy crosses, rabbits, and jelly beans. One popular candy type was the marshmallow. It is not known, however, when the Rhoda Company made its first marshmallow chick, but a 1925 catalog did not mention such a candy. However, the Rhoda family speculates that marshmallow chicks may have first appeared as a special order item for loyal customers in the early 40s. It is not known who came up with the name Peeps, though, but it does make sense. Baby chicks make the peep, 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 peep sound. What is known, however, is that making Peeps was an extremely labor-intensive process. it may have taken as many as 80 people to make a limited amount only during the Easter season. Each worker spooned small batches of freshly made marshmallow into a fluted steel tip, which squirted out the mixture into the shape of baby chicks. Then they were left to air dry, and records say that it took upwards of 27 hours to make one tray of Peeps. Seems like a lot of trouble just for a marshmallow, but they are good. I have noticed that there is something very decisive about Peeps, though. You either love them or you can't stand them. It's like candy corn. And speaking of candy, when Roscoe Rhoda died in the late 1940s, his company was looking to sell, and the Just Born Candy Company was looking to buy. And in 1953, the Just Born Company bought the Rhoda Company. And by that time, Bob Bourne, the son of the original owner Sam Bourne, was in charge of the company and was a big believer in automation. And in 1954, he built the Depositor, an automated machine that spit out 6 rows of 5 Peeps at a time. And rather than taking 27 hours to make one tray of Peeps, it only took 6 minutes. This now brings us to another very popular Easter candy, and that is the Cadbury cream eggs. And for that, we have to jump across the pond to merry old England. In 1824, a man named John Cadbury opened up a shop in Birmingham, England, where he sold a variety of drinks, including drinking chocolate. He had gained some success with the shop and opened up a chocolate and cocoa factory in 1831 with his brother in order to produce more drinking chocolate. And in 1847, a competitor of Cadbury's named Joseph Fry began experimenting with making moldable chocolate bars. This sparked Cadbury's experimentation with moldable chocolate, and in 1875, Cadbury created the first filled chocolate egg. However, the Cadbury cream egg as we know it, that is, the egg filled with, well, actually, it's not cream, it's a kind of a fondant, was created in 1963, and they were originally called Fry's cream eggs. They would become known as Cadbury cream eggs in 1971. People have been buying them ever since. Now that we have some of the most popular Easter foods taken care of, and some of the most popular Easter activities, I realized I failed to mention the Easter Parade, which goes back to the mid-1800s in New York City. High society people would attend Easter services at various Fifth Avenue churches and would then stroll outside afterward, showing off their new spring outfits and hats. And regular citizens began showing up along Fifth Avenue to see what all the fuss was about. The Easter Parade tradition still lives on in Manhattan, with Fifth Avenue from 49th Street to 57th Street being shut down during the day to traffic, and participants often wear elaborately decorated bonnets and hats. Another famous Easter tradition takes place in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and that, of course, is the Easter egg rolling. It started in the 1870s when people from all social levels in Washington, D.C. would celebrate Easter Monday on the west grounds of the White House, and children rolled brilliantly dyed hard-boiled eggs down the terraced lawn. By 1876, however, a concern for the landscape led Congress to pass legislation to restrict the public use of the Capitol grounds, which prohibited any further egg rolling. The new edict went unchallenged in 1877 as rain canceled all the day's activities. However, this would change in 1878 when President Rutherford B. Hayes decided to open the South Lawn to egg rollers, as it had previously been reserved for the First Lady's private Easter parties. And so a new tradition was born. With that, I'm afraid I may have to leave you now, folks. Well, what have we learned today? Well, I think we've learned that America most definitely is a melting pot because we have all these cultures that came together to form new Easter traditions, with the English making Cadbury cream eggs and the Germans bringing over the Easter bunny and Easter egg hunts. And hey, tell me in the comments what you plan on doing for Easter. What are your family traditions? I'm going back home from my Easter and spend time with my family. We're smoking a brisket and doing the whole 9 yards. And also, what are your favorite Easter candies? And with that, I say goodbye and God bless.